Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul, and in this Gaming to the Com video, we're going to be discussing and analysing tech news which, as usual, has popped up over the past 24 or so hours. We're going to be starting things out with the Geforce 11/Geforce 20 series. If you're one of those gamers who has been on the fence whether you should upgrade to Pascal or whether you should wait for the next generation, this video is for you. And AIB has spoken out and has given a hint as to when we're going to see Nvidia's next graphics card architecture emerge to the market. Then we're going to move over to all things AMD and Intel, specifically roadmaps: the Z490, the Z390, the 8-core Coffee Lakes, Threadripper 2, and much more besides has been leaked online thanks to an IT distributor, so we're going to be analysing that rather in depth. But first things first, I would encourage you to click the subscribe button, and I'd also encourage you, of course, to click the notification icon, and then we're going to jump into the actual news. Nvidia and the launch of the Geforce 20 series, or Geforce 11 series, or if you prefer the Pascal refresh, or if you prefer Ampere, or if you prefer Turing, because no one really knows for certain right now. That's right, there are so many different rumours and theories behind what we're going to be seeing from Nvidia. My personal take on this, real quick, is that I don't think Volta is going to come to gamers. I think that yes, we're either going to be seeing Ampere Turing or a Pascal refresh, and indeed it's going to be much more focused towards the gaming side of things. And I do think that one of the reasons that the release date hasn't really been solidified yet is a couple of reasons. One, they don't have that much competition from AMD, although things could change with 7nm Vega should we see an RX derivative of that or some other competing architecture from AMD in the gaming arena. And two, I think the price of mining and the fact that, of course, card prices and memory prices have just been absolutely ballistic right now, Nvidia most likely did not want to release a card which would essentially just be ridiculously expensive. I think it would have upset too many people, and that's why I think they've had the status quo for so long. Regardless, there has been a post on the UK retailer Overclockers UK, and this post is from a vendor rep over at Aorus/Gigabyte, and he has said, and I quote, "The range coming out now will be stable and not having any additional refreshes. The next generation of GPUs is announced, currently scheduled more towards the end of the year." Now, before you start rushing around and screaming, "Oh my god, I should just buy Pascal right now," bear in mind this is in reply to a user who is asking if there's going to be a higher spec version of the Aero 15X. This is a laptop, and the date the user was questioning was between May and June, so essentially now and a month in advance. This post, by the way, does date back a couple of weeks. It was April 16th, and the folks over at videocards.com have managed to find it. So what we have here to remember is a couple of things. The first is that the mobile versions of the Geforce series don't necessarily equate to the same time as the desktop variants. And indeed, if you were to look at the release dates of the GTX 1080 and the 1070, which of course were the first cards to be released in the 10 series lineup, we had the GTX 1070, which was released June 10th, 2016, and May 27th, 2016 for the GTX 1080. Meanwhile, the mobile derivatives for both the notebook at 1070 and the notebook 1080 was August 16th, 2016, so there was definitely a release date difference there. But if we were to take a look at the Geforce GTX 980 for desktop, it was released on the date of September 18th, 2014, but the mobile versions, well, there's a couple of different ones, but the first was released October 7th, 2014, so essentially there's about a month's difference there. Also worth taking into account is the fact that 6-core notebooks have only really just seen the light of day. Therefore, it's most likely that the manufacturers aren't particularly under pressure to upgrade the hardware, because obviously it would upset a lot of users. So judging by these release dates anyway, the desktop versions of this is not going to be released for at least a couple of months, but obviously this is tentative at best. What it does, however, show is that at the very least by the latter part of this year, we definitely will be seeing the next generation of Nvidia cards. So here's what I'd suggest, and frankly, whether you follow this advice is totally down to your particular situation, but if you have the money burning a hole in your pocket right this minute and you desperately need a graphics card because you've just built a new system and you literally cannot wait, then by all means pull the trigger and buy a graphics card, especially if you see one at a really good price. And honestly, I don't think you're going to be seeing one at a really good price for a while now. Or simultaneously, if you believe mining is going to make a comeback and possibly make graphics cards prohibitively expensive, might be worth it. Or the alternative is that if you can wait, if you've got a reasonable card right now, let's say you've got, just for sake of argument, a GTX 1070, but you've then upgraded to a 4K screen, I would probably just make do with the GTX 1070 or equivalent card and just wait for the couple of months and just see what you've got. Then again, you could also sell your card on the eBays, but of course how much of a pot of gold you end up with to put towards your next graphics card is dubious at best. And now on to AMD and Intel. So there have been an awful lot of rumours from both companies: an 8-core Coffee Lake, a Z490 from AMD, a Z390 from Intel, the release date of Threadripper 2, and so much more besides. However, there is now a series of slides which have appeared thanks to the IT distributor Blue Chip Computer, and they are a company which is based in Germany. We'll start things out with AMD because they are the quickest of the two companies to go through in terms of the number of subjects, and certainly less complex than Intel. Now, as we see from the slide, Z490 is indeed listed, and it appears to be within the emerging couple of months of the second half of 2018, so let's say June, July type of time. Unfortunately, we don't know too many details on how the Z490 differs from the X470. In fact, for many, the Z490 was pretty much just a theory, and there was so little information on it, a lot of folks actually mistook it and believed that people were just getting mixed up with the Intel platform, the Z390. So what the differences are, as I said, remains ambiguous at best. I mean, AMD are behind things on things, like embedded Wi-Fi, so it's possible that that could be the major difference. And then we also see the B450 chipset being released in late July. That's pretty much what you'd expect. It is going to be a cut down version of the X470. It's going to cost less money, but of course you have fewer features as well. But for many, I suspect the B350s were more than adequate, so I suspect that the B450s will also be a very good purchase as well, especially if you're buying something like a 1600 or 1600X. And according to this presentation, it also appears that Threadripper Refresh, or Threadripper 2, or whatever it ends up being called, is going to be emerging in the second half of the year, and it appears, with this presentation anyway, it's confirmed to be August. So just like with the original Ryzen chips, and then the second generation of Ryzen appearing in the same month, it would appear that Threadripper is going to be exactly the same. So we have Threadripper first generation appearing in August, and then the second generation of Threadripper appearing once again in August 1 year after. Now moving on to Intel, things are a little cagey when it comes to the X299 refresh, or X399, or Cascade Lake, or Coffee Lake X, or whatever it ends up being called. Blue Chip does not either have the information, or currently Intel is not feeding that information out to partners, or perhaps it's still digesting that information internally. So if you are looking to purchase a HEDT platform based upon Intel, unfortunately right now we just do not know that information. But when it comes to Z390 and the 8-core Coffee Lakes, it would appear that we do actually have some solid information, at least if these slides are accurate. Firstly, the first 8-core engineering sample target is for June 2018, so a couple of months away. Don't forget, this also ties in with the fact that some OEMs, have also let slip that there's going to be an 8-core mainstream processor from Intel some point within this year. However, judging from these slides, it doesn't appear that we're going to get this thing released tomorrow or anything like that. In fact, if the engineering samples are not going to be starting to really emerge until June, it's most likely we're not going to see this thing until at the very, very earliest October, and frankly I'd be shocked if it was that early. I wouldn't be surprised if it slips to some point in November, possibly even December of this year. When it comes to the Z390 platform itself, however, there are also numerous questions. Don't forget the Z390 has been out for about 6 months now, and it of course is key for Coffee Lake. So if you want to purchase that 8700K, you needed to of course plonk down the money for the Z390 platform when the processors were first released, but now of course you've got other options in the 300 series range. It is possible that we will see further information at Computex 2018. Don't forget Intel have a keynote there on June the 5th. But there are still many other questions. For example, will the 8-core chips be supported by older motherboards, for example the Z390? If not, that is definitely going to upset a lot of people. What exactly will the Z390s be bringing to the feature table? I mean, will we be seeing quad-channel memory? What will be the cost of them, especially with the 8-core processors as well? And with the 8-core processors, will they be the i7 series? What about the i9s? How will that affect the HEDTs from Intel? We can presume with the 8-core Coffee Lakes, or whatever they end up being based upon, they will be really gunning for the 2700X, which also lends us another question, and that is, what are AMD going to do to counter this? Are they going to save the 2800X, assuming they even manage to produce one at decent and sufficient yields, for the supposed release date of these 8-core processors? And if they do, what are they going to change? I mean, I'm presuming that they're not going to add additional cores, let's just be honest at this point. So really the only thing AMD can do is ramp up the clock speeds, but how much room is left in the tank of Ryzen? I suspect that if they do increase TDP and perhaps cherry pick samples, they could certainly go with a couple of extra 100 megahertz, maybe a little more, but I don't think they're going to be, tweaking IPC or anything like that for these particular processors. So really it's going to be a clock speed type of situation. So possibly, and this is me just making some speculation here, it's possible they might get, let's say, another 200-300 megahertz at best out of their processors, and then try to beat Intel in terms of the pricing game, which obviously has done fairly well for AMD in the past. If they manage to put out a product which is competing fairly well, particularly when it comes to the creativity suite of applications, but also at a decent price point, then obviously they're going to manage to sell a lot of processors. And this is particularly key when you consider backwards compatibility, which is definitely something that's biting Intel in the buttocks right now. I suspect we're probably going to see pitchforks and torches if Intel do not have backwards compatibility with the, let's say, Z390 motherboards. I suspect that that is going to perturb some people, and that's probably putting it somewhat mildly. I'm curious, what would be your reaction if you just bought an 8700K, a Z390, and Intel was like, yeah, about that, a couple of months later. Anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one. With all of that said, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.